He looks a lot more comfortable. So if you come from an offense like that at Oregon, all of a sudden you get here, and Troy Franklin was, what, a fourth-round pick?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the expectations for Troy were so out of whack because he played with Bo Nix in college. So now all of a sudden we thought this fourth-round pick was going to come in and be this, starter from day one. It's like, whoa. He wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't the 20th pick overall. He was a fourth-rounder. So I think the expectations were kind of out of whack for him to begin with. And then it takes you a while sometimes to get comfortable with the playbook, especially when you come from a place like Oregon where if you weren't asked to do a whole lot. Now you get here and, man, so your head's spinning. They're throwing a lot at you, and all of a sudden you're thinking so much, so you're not showing your skill set. Now this year, he does. He looks a lot more comfortable, and I think they're going to use him a lot more. And, just the way that he's getting in and out of his breaks and his speed. So, like, when you're thinking a lot, what are you doing? You're not running. You're not trying to get open. You're not thinking about how to get open against guys. You're thinking about what route should I run here? I don't want to get yelled at. What should I do here? Oh, gosh, the last pass I just dropped. I don't want to drop the ball. So now you're not thinking about any of that stuff anymore. He just looks a lot more confident and comfortable in this offense this year. And his speed is different. And I think that's going to be a huge advantage for this offense.
It definitely did feel to me like there was a mental component to Troy Franklin's struggles. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Stoke, from an expectation standpoint, because they drafted his former teammate, and they're going to have this instant chemistry like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right, who just take off together. And they were great at LSU, and now they're great with the Bengals, and you have those visions. And what I think it just kind of weighed this pressure down to where Troy Franklin, who as a fourth-round pick, frankly, if he wasn't a fourth-round pick with the camp that he had last year, he may not have made the roster. And to see him kind of come in this year here in 2025 and take the field wearing a new number, looking a little bit different physically, moving a little bit more confidently, and utilizing that skill set that was clearly the reason that they were so coveted in drafting him, I think is going to be big. And maybe it's just because we don't have a clear-cut number 2 receiver for the Broncos that makes each of these guys in Vele and Pat Bryant and Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin so intriguing. But Troy Franklin, based on some of the observations, and we've heard, I heard Mike Kliss kind of mention it at one point too, of like, don't sleep on Troy Franklin to be a kind of breakout potential number 2 wide receiver producer for the Broncos. If that connection that just always felt like it was a step or two off between him and Bo suddenly tightens up, and they're connecting on those deep balls that Bo loves to chuck every now and then, and having some of that connection and that chemistry that they had in college.
I just think that a lot of times when you're studying tape and you're studying receivers, there are some guys that are basically relegated to certain routes. Hey, man, you're a guy that's going to run in-cutting routes, over routes, like things of that nature. Some guys are just outside the numbers. And to Stokes' point, man, you're talking about formations and then motions and then on the fly reading coverage and saying, hey, man, if I get this coverage, I got to break it at this depth, those kind of things. So there's a lot of thought that goes into playing any position in the National Football League, frankly. And it will, like if you're thinking out there as a player, it slows you down. And so the more you know, the more it becomes second nature, the more understanding you have of the game in general, the better off and the faster you can play. And so year 1 to year 2, as you mentioned in camp last year, we had some concerns about the way he played in camp last year. That's a really good sign for the Broncos. And one of the reasons they probably, didn't go after a free agent wide receiver, why they didn't go out, I know they drafted Bryant, but you know what I'm saying? Like where everybody else was concerned, there as a coaching staff and an organization going, hey, man, we got a couple of guys that are going to take that next step that we're really excited about.
They went out and drafted Pat Bryant, but it was in the 3rd round, so they had 2 other rounds in theory where they could have more heavily addressed that. They also didn't bring in anybody in free agency outside of Trent Sherfield, who, and we can put a pin in it, but I will just say as an observation of guys we're keeping an eye on, Trent Sherfield has caught a lot of balls so
he's
far
a good player.
in training camp.
He's a really good player.
He was labeled as somebody that's like, oh, he's going to be a special teams contributor. I think Mike labeled that in the signing when he was talking about it. I think he's a guy that could see actual meaningful snaps and catching real passes from Bo Nix this year.
Yeah, sure.
But to go back to Troy Franklin, he's somebody that clearly has a skill set that is exploitable and marketable, and it's about showing enough flashes to be able to do that. And I think that despite the up and down season and maybe the mental toll that he was taking, I think Troy Franklin did a better job of that, rebounding from a bad camp, than a guy like Audric Estime, who Sean Payton also had a vision for, picking him up in the 5th round, and just never seemed to be able to put it all together. If he was running well, it was mirrored by ball security issues. And then if he was holding on to the ball outside of that final drive of the Chiefs game, they have the blocked field goal that could have won it, it was just uninspiring. And now Estime kind of finds himself not in the position that Troy Franklin is in, of maybe fighting to stay in the top 4 in this running back room.
Well, I think when you look at the receivers and a guy like Troy Franklin, it's going to be a situation where you're looking for a number 2 guy, right? I don't think you're going to have one guy emerge from that group when you look at Mims and Vele and Franklin and possibly Pat Bryant. I think you're going to see what we saw last year. Sean used these guys to their strengths, and you're going to see different personnel groupings, and all 3 of those guys are going to play a lot. But going into year 2 for Vele and Franklin, and obviously Mims going into year 3 is going to be huge, right? And so I'm expecting that wide receiver group to take another step forward, especially with Bo going into year 2. Better running game. All those things matter, and I think you're going to see pretty much the same things that we saw last year from this offense, and a lot of different personnel groupings. But Sean and that offensive staff using these wide receivers to their strengths.
And you're okay with that, Stoke, if we go into the 2025 season and we finish this thing up and we don't have a clear-cut number 2 wide receiver like we thought last year? You think that maybe because of the new personnel or the new development they have, that's actually a fine and healthy thing for this Broncos offense?
Well, unless someone emerges and kind of takes over that spot and says, okay, I'm the dude that needs to play 50, 60 plays a game. Other than that, you got to kind of mask it because you don't have a T. Higgins on the side of Jamar Chase. So what do? You have to figure out a way to help these guys out a little bit. And we saw it with the tight ends last year, and we saw it with the wide receivers last year. And I think that's what you'll continue to see. But I think these guys are going to take a step forward, and you're going to see them produce at a level. I think that might surprise some people out there. And you're going to see some guy. Vele, man, he looks good.
He's so smooth.
He is smooth, and he catches everything. He's tough.
He's big, too, man.
Yep, and
big
he's physical. And Franklin, he's good run after the catch. But Sean and that staff do a really good job of using these guys to their strengths. And they did it last year, and I think you're going to continue to see them do it this year.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is you look at who's that number 2. We get so enamored with that. I mean, what if your tight end now in Ingram gets 55,
Bingo.
60 catches, right? What if all of a sudden you got a back that catches the ball 35 times, and you've got – so you can spread the ball. And Sean wants to spread the wealth. He wants to move things around. He wants every guy to be a legitimate target, so you can't just key in on, hey, we're gonna go, man-to-man with our best corner on your number 2, and we're going to double-team Cortland Sutton, and we're just going to shut you down. Good, do that. Because then what we'll do is exploit the middle of the football field with backs. We'll exploit the middle of the football field with our tight end. We'll crush you in those things. So I think that's really good. The other thing I just wanted to say is, as a player, I played here my first year with Anthony Miller, who was a Pro Bowl player. And we didn't even know who Rod Smith was. Even on the team, we didn't know who Rod Smith was. He was a former quarterback from southeastern Louisiana State, Monroe, Missouri. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Stoke. And so he was practice squad cutting up our defense. And I'll never forget our meeting in 1996. After we released Anthony Miller, said this dude Rod Smith could play running back for us. He's going to be a top flight wide receiver. And we're like, what? We didn't even know him. And he comes out and just goes crazy. So sometimes, as a fan base, I think we get a little nervous and go, hey, we got to get a receiver, we got to get a veteran guy. Where the coaching staff goes, hey, we know the guys better than you guys know the guys. And we're pretty confident and pretty comfortable with the guys we have and the progress they made last year and what they're going to do this year in regards to our offense, run the ball better, and those guys like Vele, like you're talking about, Franklin, like you're talking about, Mims, all those guys. So sometimes you have to, and I know this is a Rockies thing, and you've got to trust the organization, right? Unlike the Rockies, you can actually, I think, trust the Broncos, brain trust, because they've done the things the right way.
I think that's That's the thing. That's what I'm excited about is watching that group of wide receivers and hopefully one or two guys emerge from that group. It's like all of a sudden, we think we got just one guy out there in Cortland and then some other guys that are good players. But I think a couple of those guys could really pop this year, and all of a sudden, like, oh wow, we got a trio of wide receivers that we're excited about.
Talking to former Broncos receiver Benny Fowler, who's out here at training camp observing things, and he was talking about Evan Ingram and your point about maybe Evan Ingram potentially could flirt with wide receiver 2 level production as the joker in Sean Payton's offense. Benny Fowler was saying, and we talked about it, Stoke and I did earlier, from a body type perspective, Evan Ingram reminds Benny Fowler of like a Demaryius Thomas wide receiver style body. And on the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043, Stoke, people are giving Emmanuel Sanders type of comparisons or vibes when they watch Troy Franklin so far in camp. When you've watched him with the way that he moves and the skill set that he has, does that give you shades of what the Broncos had with Emmanuel Sanders at all, or is there a comp? Is there a comp?
I'd say
maybe
pump our brakes on that one.
I agree.
Emmanuel was a whole nother level.
He was special.
Yeah, and so no, I'm not ready to go there yet. Emmanuel, his quickness, his inline is 5 to 10 yards and getting in and out of breaks. But I will say this: so I'm not ready to go there. We'll see, this year what he looks like. Emmanuel was a stud. I like what I've seen from Troy, and I think he's going to contribute this year. And I think he's going to have a really good year.